Okay, thanks very much. Yes, the net Imam paradox. Some of this is based around the research of my book, hashtag Islam, and the kind of work that I do snapshots of websites, social media, other online materials. I've been archiving Islam Muslims in the net for over 20 years. I'm really interested in aspects of religious expression, networking and identity. And I'm narrating an overview of the interaction between Islam, Muslims and online media. I do some work on so-called radicalization, but that's not the focus of today's presentation, because as has been spoken about earlier, there is an evolution of notions of authority and leadership, and this extends into digital technology, which shapes how Muslims across vast territories are relating to religious authorities in fulfilling their spiritual, mystical and legalistic agendas. And this is particularly true for millennials and digital natives, who respond more perhaps to aspects of online authority than their analog equivalents. And of course this impacts on everyday concepts of religious knowledge and identity, and also raises some radicalization concerns as well. Online environments are challenging traditional models of authority, and the influence and impact of digitally literate religious scholars and authorities goes beyond the traditional boundaries of imams, alims, mullahs, sheikhs and so on. Diverse religious perspectives are contesting for audiences in the UK and beyond, reflecting on multimedia approaches from a variety of players. So how do those organisations and platforms in the UK respond to contemporary concerns in the light of continually changing religious and media contexts? And in order to try and tackle this, I talk about cyber-Islamic environments. That's my primary research focus. And naturally I draw lots of diagrams about these things, trying to bring them down into a graphical format. So I look at aspects of religious sources and networking, diversity, politics, Islamic expression and leadership, and this goes into diverse media, including most recently social media, lots of different interfaces, and of course the challenge of mobile technology as well. Research questions include: when Islam is always on, does this aid or impede clarity and understanding of religious values by Muslims, particularly in Western contexts? And in what ways does social media impact upon notions of religious understanding? How is the immediacy and searchability of the internet impacting on notions of religious authority online? And how have different internet hierarchies of authority developed specifically in relation to social media? Because the algorithms of Sheikh Google mediate amongst the information overload of fatwas and religious opinions. And as has been spoken about earlier, some of the traditional authorities have in some cases been challenged and usurped online by contenders whose authority is in some cases based as much on digital proficiency and online networks as traditional training and values. And of course the interaction can be across a variety of platforms. We have issues to do with let's just go back one, the reduced digital divide as well, with more people coming online in diverse contexts, the expansion of mobile phones, the increase in digital literacy. We've got better broadband, except in parts of Wales, and social networks are expanding as well. We've seen an evolution, even in the period of this research, where I've gone from text to file transfer protocol and listserv and chat room activities. Some of you might remember some of these devices from the past. You might even have one in your garage. And then we've gone from different kinds of browsers as well, an evolution of MP3, video clips, and devices have changed in size as well. And you try showing a digital disc to somebody under the age of 20 and they don't know what to do with it. They put their coffee on it. But believe me, these used to be important once upon a time. So the evolution of devices has also meant an evolution in the type of information that's conveyed about Islam as well, through online magazines and multimedia and embedded kinds of content as well. So with that evolution, I've been trying to track that over time to see what a difference it makes in terms of ideas about authority. So in terms of Islamic products, we've seen a variety of apps that have emerged most recently, dedicated products, endorsed products as well, all with the particular iconography and symbolism attached with them as well. They've become more nuanced over time. The so-called long tail of demand has fitted into the Islamic model very well. So we have very nuanced, multilingual and interactive types of content. So looking at this in terms of the way in which it's impacted on UK organisations and platforms, well, what have we got at the moment? We've got online identities that reflect diversity between and within a variety of Muslim contexts that go beyond simple parameters. And of course, the complexity of historical and contemporary understandings play out online. So all of the identities and many more that have been discussed earlier are all reflected in some way in cyberspace. And within the UK, this reflects in a variety of organisations that are going to flash before your eyes in different ways, many of which you will identify with as different ways in which Islam is being mediated in the UK at present, often by organisations, platforms and individuals in some cases who are presenting their ideas. That was rather too fast, but you get the idea of this kind of immersion in lots of ideas about identity and what it means to be Muslim and how that identity is being reflected online in different ways. So it's a big, big spiritual supermarket, as one person once said, where people can dip into different ideas about religion and what it means online, with all of their attendant controversies in some cases, but also ideas about diversity and different ideas about religious authority as well, the way in which people are actually going online to get their information and find out about how to act Islamically is an important element within this model. So ideas of arbitration and so-called Sharia courts are also playing out online as well. Within all of these models, we've also got the contesting external influences, and we have to consider how are these impacting on ideas and decision making within UK contexts. So how are these big portals and players impacting Islamicity, about Islam, and other online preachers as well, like Al-Munajid? How are these products impacting on ideas about how people process the Quran, the Hadith, other sources online? And what's the impact of the Q&A type format in terms of people actually Googling an answer for their own particular issues? I'm not going to go through all of these questions now, they're far too complicated, we haven't got time. But they do indicate the range of questions, the surprising range of questions that actually appears online, and the surprising range of people who are providing them, who have very substantial numbers of followers and build up quite a following, and then suddenly they disappear as well. We have that information vacuum that occurs at time as well. So the variety of players is an important element within this, and the impact of e-learning too. People can shop around for the kind of product that they're looking for. They can have home learning or online learning as part of that process of religious authority as well. So the variety of players and the complexity of that variety of players is an important element. And I'm wondering whether, I mean, maybe you can answer this yourself, there's a case for saying that there's an information overload in terms of the amount of information that is being provided online. Is there too much information from too many different perspectives? We have every nuance of understanding and interpretation available, often in detailed databases like the Sufi-e-Sheikh, which has questions on so many different issues and covers so many different parts of what is one branch of the multiplicity of identities associated with Sufism. Add to the cocktail the multimedia, cross-media platforms as well, like the TV channels, podcasts as well, and you can already see we're getting saturated by the different ideas that have become available. So we have a number of alternative voices that are appearing as well, presenting interpretations and sermons to UK audiences online, and they're focused on online delivery and networking, and perhaps they're providing alternative approaches to the delivery of authority, utilising multimedia and especially social media, where in some cases authenticity issues can apply as well. So for some of these discussions you have to go into secure areas. Some of the youth-focused networking might require the use of Snapchat and Telegram and so forth as well. So over time we've seen a variety of players emerge that have been promoting their ideas, but also this whole idea of the media personality is presenting more online as well. The idea that you can build up a profile as an individual, and this is just a cross-section of the individuals who are promoting themselves and their organizations are promoting themselves as sort of individual internet personalities who have been able to build up a profile that goes beyond the traditional boundaries into national and in some cases international contexts. So a number of these individuals and scholars are presenting multimedia. They're presenting, in this case, music as well as interpretation, a whole multimedia presentation from some of the scholars as well. And then the contestation of the complex identities associated with Salafi identities online are also playing out in association with these concerns. So people are being exposed to a variety of conferences, ideas. We often have a soft introduction into a lot of the content, and then you can go and sort of drill deeper and deeper. People can get more and more involved in the content over time. So we have something like Salafi Sounds, which one of my postgraduates is just finishing up his PhD looking at this. Ibrahim Abu Sharif is working in this area, where we're looking at micro audiences of material that can in some cases be quite contentious, building up exclusively in the sort of online environment. So to get to my question where I started, the net Imam paradox, the big question is, and this is something I'd like to ask some of you as well, is how does one respond to this information overload of authority and opinions? How does one respond to the shifting media contexts that are there? We have an information overload of potential online influences, and whilst diversity is a key to interpretation, it might be very difficult for organisations and platforms who are competing with fluid media which can respond very quickly from diverse sources. We've got an intensified relationship between individuals and devices, especially for digital natives who are far more responsive to their iPads, to their phones, than they are to human beings. So I think the paradox here, one of the questions is, how are the organisations and platforms who might not be so digitally literate going to grasp this challenge, where the information isn't available or people are looking elsewhere because the traditional authorities are unable to provide answers to their questions? People are going online, they're looking at all of these things. You can find them on Google very quickly. You type a few questions into Google and all sorts of authorities will emerge. So the question is, how are the organisations and platforms going to manage this information overload over time? What kind of education are they going to give their functionaries in order to cope with this? How much is being done on data management? How much is being done on mediating computer environments in terms of religious training as well? Are people being trained to input electronic materials as much as they're being trained to do the micro management of texts? We can look at HTML, but also we can look at Arabic text as well. They've both got their interesting complications. And in order to make this response, the apps and other media are going to require over time, in the next 10 years, 5-10 years, they're going to require an investment. They're going to require an investment in time, but also an investment in experience. And whether that experience is already there is something that's questionable, where you see that the traditional authorities have been overtaken by those people who are very digitally literate, who might not come from the same traditional background. So that input in terms of funding considerations is really important. That's going to be the challenge as well as the paradox, how the authorities are going to manage over time, how individuals and mosques are going to manage, and what kind of training is going to come out of the seminaries and other educational processes in order to meet the challenges of the 21st century in relation to religious authority and mediating opinion. So I'm hoping I'll be able to get some answers to some of these questions. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of digital material. But take a look at my website too, because I do look at some of these questions in a lot more detail at virtuallyislamic.com. And thanks for your time.